a little bit. Let's just see what we've got so far. Oh. So let's get started. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Rob Comey. I'm the psychiatry lead for the project. I'm joining you from Vancouver, where I live on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. Tonight's presentation is our seventh and last in our virtual series on psychedelics and complementary techniques. I want to say a really heartfelt thank you to Ellie Molnar, our project lead, who dreamed up and executed this project with the awesome support of our GP lead, Dr. Jenna Creaser, and Antoinette and her team. And they've provided all sorts of great technical and logistical support. So thanks so much. That was a real thrill to ride shotgun on this adventure. Thanks for having me with you. I appreciate it. We've had some remarkable presentations from many different speakers in this field. I can't think of a better presenter to wrap things up tonight than Dr. Kryskow. Start with some housekeeping points. The session is recorded except for the breakout rooms. You can be unedited in your breakout rooms. Please write down any questions you have during the presentation, and you can ask those later and post them in the chat box for the question and answer period. Attendance is recorded for CME credits. Please identify yourself in Zoom, use your full name, or you can complete the attendance survey. You'll find a link for that in the chat box. After an introduction, we'll start with Dr. Kryskow's presentation, how to get more psychedelic experience and training. Then we'll spend a few minutes in breakout rooms. We'll move to the Q&A session with Dr. Pam, and we'll plan to wrap up and be finished by about 8:30 tonight. So Dr. Pam's bio. Dr. Pamela Kryskow is a medical director with a strong interest in psychedelic medicine, mental health, and chronic pain. She is the medical lead in the Roots to Thrive Ketamine Assisted Therapy program that treats healthcare providers with PTSD, depression, anxiety, and addiction. And she's also the medical lead for the My Community Thrives team that provides psilocybin therapy for patients with end-of-life anxiety who have Section 56 exemptions from the health minister. Dr. Pam is a founding board member of the Canadian Psychedelic Association and is part of an expert team working to give Canadians access to psilocybin for end of life. Dr. Pam is actively involved in research related to psilocybin, ketamine, mental wellness, and neurogenesis. She is a clinical instructor at the University of British Columbia and an adjunct professor at Vancouver Island University. Dr. Pam is also co-investigator of the largest microdosing study, I think, in the world, Microdose.me, which is ongoing with over 15,000 participants. In real life, she likes foraging in the forest, ocean kayaking, growing kale, and daydreaming in her hammock. My experience of Dr. Pam is that she sees opportunities where others see barriers. She is a sensitive provider and a true leader in the community. Please welcome Dr. Pam.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks a lot. And I want to add my kudos to this team for putting this together, for Ellie for spearheading it, Antoinette, Rob, and Jenna. Absolutely applause to you for getting this off the ground and doing this. I think this is probably the first real series like this in Canada, maybe even North America. Many more have jumped on since, but kudos to you. So I will share my screen here. Oh, somebody else is sharing. Rob, you have to stop share. Or Mark. Is there Mark sharing? Somebody else is sharing.
I don't think it's me.
Oh, no, yeah, it's done now. Okay, let me see if I can get this here to share. All right. That show up, Rob? One slide? Great. Okay, thanks. So thank you very much. So I'm going to be presenting today on psychedelic medicine training programs. Let me get my picture out of the way here. Sorry, on my screen. There we go. All right. So first off, I'd like to acknowledge, in the spirit of reconciliation, that I currently live on the unceded traditional territory of the Klahoose First Nation. I offer respect, honor, and love to the people of this land and all the ancestors who have lived here since time immemorial. My conflicts with regards to this presentation today is that I am an adjunct professor at VIU, and I will be talking about a psychedelic program that is starting there. I have consulted with the team at University of Ottawa, where there's another program starting there. I've taught at some of the programs, Microdose and ATMA, and I've trained many instructors at many of the programs that I'm going to be mentioning today. And when I was preparing for this, I recalled that the very first time I ever presented on psychedelic training opportunities was in 2019. And at that time, there was about 5 credible opportunities, and now it has absolutely exploded. And I was kind of blown away by how many things there. I knew about a lot of them, but there's so many more. So I'm going to try to hit today on what current opportunities there are for training and what the emerging opportunities are. I know I'm going to miss some, even just in the chat. I think Ian, you mentioned that there's some more training going on. I missed that. So there's definitely going to be some that I've missed. Please forward those on to me. And the reason is I've created a PDF of all the learning opportunities that I could find, and I will add them to that, and I will get those to Antoinette so that she can email them out. There's just far too many to have in a presentation like this. The way I approach this presentation is to go through the different layers of the opportunities for training. So there is obviously academically oriented ones, such as the universities and colleges. There's also privately accredited institutes, more so in the US. There's nonprofit programs, and there's private programs, and there's many, many others. So I'm going to start at the top with academics and then move through this list. So the first one, there are actually 2 programs that are about to be announced next year that are academically oriented in Canada. And the first one is one I'm involved with at Vancouver Island University. It will be a postgraduate certificate in psychedelic medicine assisted therapy and held within the Health and Human Services Department. All professionals will be able to apply. And additionally, we've set up the program so that others with relevant experience, such as chaplains or people in spiritual care, will be able to ask to be grandfathered in and brought into the program. It's mostly going to be an online program, given that COVID has made things uncertain, and most academic programs are preparing for online versus in person. So this program will have large online groups that then break down into smaller learning groups. The additional bonus of this program is there actually will be a 90-hour practicum in person, allowing people to get the experience of having a psychedelic experience or many psychedelic experiences and facilitating those. And even another bonus is that we have collaborated with the MAPS MDMA training. And so people coming out of this program will actually come out with not only the postgraduate certificate, but also with the MAPS MDMA training. certificate. And the total cost is anticipated to be around 7,725 Canadian. Launching at about the same time will be a master's in psychedelic and consciousness medicine at the University of Ottawa. Currently, they trialed last year, the year before, 3 microcredit courses that went very well. And so they're going to be putting their master's within the religious studies a department at the university. And they haven't quite hammered out the final details completely, but they're looking at 28 to 30 credits in the main program and 3 to 6 credits in the practicum. And the cost of that master's program will be over 2 years, 5,000 in each of 2 years. And that's not carved in stone. It hasn't fully been announced, but we expect that they'll now announce in the new year at the same time as the Vancouver Island University program. Additionally, in BC, there has been a number of individual courses. The Justice Institute has a program called Psychedelic Therapy, Hope and Healing. It's a half-credit course. I believe Trinity Western University under Claire Weiss might have had one program. I couldn't track it down, so apologies for that. And I'm sure there's many others that I've missed. So if anybody knows of any other universities that have offered individual courses or any of the, like BCIT, any of the technical institutes may have added a course, I'd love to have that added in if you know of them. Academically in the US, there's the Naropa University, which is one of very few that are actually academic in an academics facility, sorry. And this one will be a certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies. And they're a very similar I can't talk tonight, it's quite late. For me, I guess, apologies. So their prerequisites will be very similar to Ottawa and Vancouver Island University, which will be professional degrees in medicine or healthcare or mental health will be allowed. And then they're also allowing in people to make an argument such as chaplaincy or spiritual care people or people that have been working maybe in the underground. Their program is quite a bit more, so very similar, online and in person with some retreats and some practicum opportunities, but a little bit more expensive, 10,000 US. And they do also include the MAPS. And in fact, they've been working with MAPS and USONA. So anyone going to this program would likely have some capacity either to move into a job with USONA or will also have the MAPS MDMA training along with that. Just recently announced was University of Wisconsin at Madison, who has announced a Master's of Science in their pharmaceutical department. So a Master's of Science program in psychoactive pharmaceutical investigations. And just in case you don't know, that is also the home city of USONA. And so a lot of the faculty there will be people that have been working with USONA or have been, long in the labs in the pharmaceutical divisions. So people that are more pharmaceutically oriented may want to go that way. 31 graduate credits, and the full cost if you do the full 31 credits is about $46,000 US. So quite a price tag on that. So also more in the institute in the academics is the California Institute of Integral Studies. Usually people just refer to this as CIIS. They've been probably going one of the longest programs and well-established, fantastic heritage in that program, lots of archival footage and just really great people. And that is a psychedelic therapies and research certificate program. Many physicians in BC have gone through that, and I know probably a dozen going through it right now. 150 hours online and some possibility of in person. I know they've had to do some shuffling with COVID. 2 4-day weekends, 6-day in person, not an unperson, apologies for that typo, and 2-day online. And it covers half of the MAPS MDMA training, according to their current website, but I think they were had planned to transition that to a full MDMA certificate at some point in the near future. And they've just expanded, they've just doubled their capacity with the East Coast and a West Coast cohort going through now every session or every startup of this. And the cost of that is around 9,000 US. If we move to nonprofits, coming back to Canada, TheraPsil offers a program on psilocybin assisted therapy. Many of you will know that Therasil led the way on getting the Section 56 exemptions, and waited for 5 years before anything happened, thanks to Dr. Bruce Tobin, who did a ton of work here and is really a hero in this area. And then Therasil, the nonprofit, has really taken this on, and there's a lot of Section 56s that are yet waiting to be awarded or given by the health minister. That program is 160 hours, includes online and a retreat, and ranges from 2,000 to 2,800 depending. Additionally, privately at my Journey Centers in Alberta, it has an introductory, and this is a basic introductory program. It's open to anyone. There's no prerequisites for this, and they see it as kind of more of a Psychedelics 101. It's 20 hours, about 8 weeks. They have online and retreat options. I don't think the retreat is included in the price tag, but maybe somebody can correct me if I'm in error here. And the price of their program is about $2,500 US. Moving it back to the US, MAPS, of course, a pioneer in this with their MDMA therapy training. Their goal is to train, I think, like 9,000 people in the very near future, with 100,000 is their grand goal of getting MDMA therapists trained. So they have been really working very hard and have expanded quite quickly. Their program is about 100 hours. It's online and has weekend intensives, and is now 5,000 US dollars, which is actually a big drop. It used to be 9,000 US. So when I saw that they had dropped their price, I thought, that's great. That brings it a lot more into the affordable range. Private in Canada, holotropic breathwork and Groth legacy training. They have a psychedelic psychotherapy that follows the insights of Stanislav Grof. It's online, and this bit, I couldn't get a lot of details, so I'm sorry that I don't know if the $87 covers, but it may be archival videos is what I suspect they are. Maybe 8 hours of archival videos, and if I can get more information, I'll try to get that on the PDF for you. Privately, moving into the US, there has been an explosion of private groups in the US offering psychedelic training of some sort or another. Some with a lot more credentialed people, and some with not so much. This one is a completely private, so there is no academic certificate with this one, but the lineup of their professors are not their professors, their faculty is quite impressive. So the prerequisites here is an advanced degree in medicine or mental health, and then the program itself is 200 hours, large and small groups, online intensives, and optional experiential training with ketamine. And its cost, depending on the combination of how many intensives you attend, is somewhere between 8,500 to 10,000 US. Fluence is really in the US, has really jumped into doing a lot of training. And if you go into their website, this is just a taste of what they're offering. So they have a lot of courses on their website that range from just, a touch in on 101 or beginning on integration therapy, right into quite a bit longer programs, including book clubs, journal clubs, and some integration therapeutic peer support sort of stuff. So you'd really actually just have to go to their website and click through, but they started with 1 or 2 programs, mostly around ketamine, and now they've really expanded into a lot more. This group I hadn't heard of, but I stumbled upon them, the Science of Psychedelics. They're targeting professionals, and they have 9 hours of online courses. And like I said, in the PDF, you'll get all of these are listed along with their websites. So for those of you that want to look into maybe some of the less expensive options, if you're just dipping your foot into the psychedelic space, might want to look at this. Moving into, there's a lot of private in-house training. I mentioned USONA before. USONA does do, if you happen to be employed by USONA or any of these companies, they do a lot of their own in-house training of their therapists. And they tend to lean towards hiring therapists that have already gone through CIIS or MDMA, but they also do a lot of in-house training. Field Trip as well, I believe, is doing their own in-house training around ketamine. Field Trip has clinics in Canada and the US. And I know a number of their trainers, and I think most of their training is now in-house. Compass in the UK has in-house training as well. And I believe I might be speaking out a bit here, but I didn't want to miss, if I could not miss people, I think Numinous is doing some in-house training as well, if you happen to be on their staff in BC and Ontario. And hopefully somebody can correct me if I'm giving wrong information. Ketamine assisted therapy. So this is happening everywhere and anywhere. This is just a sampling of where you can get ketamine therapy or assisted therapy training. Healing Realms has a long history of it, and then they do some really great peer support groups for people that go through their training. Ketamine Associates, Healing Realms is with Jessica Katzman and Robert. Sorry, I'm forgetting his last name. Apologies. Ketamine Associates is Dr. Phil Wolfson, who has been doing this for 30 plus years, and he has come up to BC and has done some training programs here for us. And now he mostly does their programs in the US. They also have a very robust peer group for support and research. And they are actually, I think they have a few clinical trials going through now with their experience. So that's great. Fluence, who I mentioned earlier. Prodi is also another organization that's offering a lot of ketamine programs. Integrative Psychiatry Institute has a lot of ketamine programs, as well as a whole psychedelic program, which I mentioned earlier. Polaris and Roots to Thrive is training some therapists as well here in BC. Now, if you want more of an international flavor, MindMed Australia has taken off. Australia went from essentially nothing happening to everything happening there. So if you feel like traveling to Australia, they have really launched. And this is their certificate in psychedelic assisted therapies. So it's again open to professionals with any kind of medical or mental wellness degree. It's 90 hours online webinars and face-to-face. So they are catering a bit to an international crowd as well. There's week intensives, and they use holotropic breathwork as their practicum. And they have a supervised practicum that follows the course, and that has an extra cost to it, I believe. And that's 9,000 Australian. Heading a bit further north, that Mind Foundation in Berlin has a certificate in psychedelic integration therapy and coaching in the first year. And if you go into their second year, it's a certificate in psychedelic augmented psychotherapy in their second year. And again, the prerequisites there are medical and healthcare providers, and the cost is 15,000 euros. Privately in the Netherlands is Synthesis. They've been going for quite a while, and they've got a great reputation. A lot of grads from the CIIS program will go down to Synthesis to get their practicum exposure. And a number of professionals I know have gone and have been quite impressed with their program. They have a good faculty lineup as well. And that is a 12-month program with a 10-day immersive. They offer truffle psilocybin therapy in their therapy component of their, they also do retreat centers in addition to this training. So they have the capacity there to actually do the practicum component using psilocybin truffles. They will train licensed and unlicensed therapists. So they are catering to a lot of people who have been doing this work in the underground. And so they will definitely accept people if you don't have a professional degree. So it's approximately 150 hours online plus the 10-day intensive, and the cost is 18,000 US. Moving into the private online non-credentialed. So these are what I mentioned earlier, a lot of programs jumping up, and such as, like these are mostly like online magazines, online newsletters, groups and stuff that are filling the gaps. There's such a clamoring for programming right now. For trip sitting, for integration, that these ones have really come into creating a lot of content. And this is mostly catering to non-professionals, although I'm sure there's a lot of professionals taking the programs as well to get their feet wet and get kind of the 101 levels. But Psychedelics today has a large menu item of different programs. Trip sitters mostly started as basically people sitting, just as their name sounds, but they have moved a little bit more into integration. Microdose Company is offering a lot of do-it-yourself microdosing, training and coaching programs. Double Blind started as a magazine and is now has a number of programs. And on the PDF that I will get to Antoinette for her to get out to you, there is probably another 20 listings there of places with the links to all those. And so that's really a look at the landscape here. And I knew that, you know, that the audience here is varied and the skills are varied and people are coming in at different levels. So I really did want to give an overview of what was out there. Now that you see that there's a lot, then when you get the PDF, if there's something that really, really caught your eye, you can go there to that level and take a look at it. And I'm happy to, we'll probably be posting the exact same thing on the Canadian Psychedelic Association website as well. And so if you want to see an updated list on a regular basis, if you're thinking of at what level do I want to get more training and what are my options, we'll keep that list updated for you there. It's expanding so fast. I suspect that by 2030, most universities in Canada and probably most of the technical institutes in Canada will probably, if they have any kind of psychology department, counseling, anything like that, that they will most likely have psychedelic programming by 2030. I would be shocked if that doesn't happen. I would suspect that every medical school will have psychedelic programming within its psychiatry residency. I would hope so. The psychiatric residents are definitely asking for the training, so I'd be surprised if that doesn't happen. And then I expect the colleges will be stepping up too and offering this alongside their counseling programs. So I want to thank you. I know a little bit shorter than you probably expected, but geez, it would be pretty dry to go into all those programs. I do want to cover one other thing. I'm just going to go over here. There are, you're probably wondering, I made a list of other types of training that really go hand in hand with psychedelics, and most of the really good programs will have some level of this in their programming. And what it really comes down to, my friend Raquel Bennett, who is Dr. Raquel Bennett, who is a real expert in ketamine, really drills something into people when they ask, what should I do to get psychedelic, to become a psychedelic therapist? And she says the best thing you can do is first be a really good therapist. So have a really good modality or a number of modalities that you're quite good at and that you're skilled at. And then you can add the psychedelic therapies on top of that. You can add that into your toolbox as a skill. So here's some things that really also make you a really good therapist, or some therapies that really go really, really well. And most of the programs are integrating them in some way or another. They might not be teaching them per se strongly as a component, but they're definitely using elements of these programs. So EMDR, mindful-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, eye movement desensitization, repatterning, mindfulness. Oh, sorry, some repetition there. Meditation, psychotherapy, acceptance and commitment therapy is actually in a few clinical trials with psychedelic medicines right now. I think we'll see that as a real standard in a lot of these therapies. Dr. Adele France has her emotion focused therapy, which works very well with psychedelics. Internal family systems, Richard Schwartz, it's definitely is being paired a lot with psychedelic medicine therapy. And then a few other areas that are standalone programs. Dr. Gabor Mate has his compassionate inquiry program that covers a lot of trauma and addiction, but is also works side by side with the psychedelic modalities. Relational somatic therapy, somatic experiencing, sensoromotor psychotherapy, dynamic attachment repatterning, experience, Hakomi therapy, somatic transformation, and body dynamic therapy. I'm sure there's many more, but this is just a taste, and I'll make sure these are all listed on the PDF as well. So with that, I know that was a little quick and maybe a bit brief, but maybe you get a few minutes back of your night this evening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pam. Yeah, it really has this feeling like things are just expanding and exploding, and there's a wave of opportunities coming.
Yeah, the amount is mind-boggling that has come out since 2019. When I looked at the presentation I gave in 2019, there were 5.
Wow.
It's expanded.
Impressive. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And yes, being timely, I think no one's upset about that. So what we'll do is we'll transition into our breakout rooms and we will stay there for 8 minutes.
Sorry, there was a few questions in chat that we're hoping could maybe be answered as well.
Yeah, so we get to those questions after our breakout. So we just take an 8-minute break and then we'll do our Q&A for the rest of the session there. And yeah, I do see lots of questions coming in already, so that's great. So yeah, we'll get our breakout rooms started up, or a chance for a bio break, or use this time as an opportunity to meet and come together with a few other people who are interested in the psychedelic psychotherapy movement and hear about what each other thought of the presentation, maybe share about where you're coming from, if you've tuned into some of the other talks, and then we'll all come back together again here with Pam for our Q&A. Thank you so much. Okay, looks like almost everyone has made it back here. Lovely. All right, Dr. Pam, are you ready for our Q&A here? There's lots of questions coming in already. And so our first one.
I just want to speak with the caveat. There's a lot of brain power on this. Anyone else wants to jump in and answer the questions, please do.
Great point. Thank you. So our first question was, as an MD-GP, where would be a good place to start?
Yeah. Where does this one start? I guess it really depends where you're at. You know, like I think like when I have colleagues come to me who know nothing about psychedelics and the war on drugs is still owning most of the space in their heads, I think you first have to get that out. And there's about 12 really fantastic TED Talks. So I'm gonna plug the CPA a bit, the Canadian Psychedelic Association. If you go to the site psychedelicassociation.net, there's a lot of resources there. All the good TED Talks are there. That's the first place to start. There's and then from there you can kind of go down the rabbit hole and figure out what you want to learn. There are fantastic YouTube talks. Almost every major university has psychedelic rounds now on some sort. So you can sign up, like Stanford has psychedelic rounds. UC Berkeley has psychedelic rounds, NYU, Johns Hopkins. If you go, just type in psychedelic medical rounds, you'll get really high quality programming there. And then if you're really serious about jumping in, a lot of doctors are doing the MAPS MDMA training. It's you'll be in there with a lot of colleagues. CIIS is, these are well-established programs that you can jump into. And if you're really, really serious and you want to get a postgraduate certificate, you've got the options at Vancouver Island University, or if you want to get your master's, going to University of Ottawa. I hope that helps. But I think the first thing is just start with the TED Talks and work out from there. And at the Canadian Psychedelic Association, in our webinar section, we really do try to fill in the gaps and really try to bring up the knowledge level of people. Like we cover the history of psychedelics in Canada. It's fascinating. Dr. Erica Dick out of Saskatchewan, the University of Saskatchewan, is a fantastic, world-renowned historian. And watching anything by her is worth it. It's really worth it to see where Canada was at the early days of psychedelic medicine, especially in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, for the psychiatrists here. Really fascinating work with psilocybin and LSD around alcoholism and depression. The term psychedelic was coined in Canada. So, we have a strong history here of it. And then also looking at the war on drugs, there's a really good webinar with Dr. Neil Boyd, who's a criminologist at SFU, and Dr. Deborah Small, who's an activist lawyer out of the US. And they really cover the history of the criminalization of these drugs in Canada and the US. And so that really helps, because once you wipe that out, then the curiosity is full on. And there is a number of great probably UC Berkeley is a nice one. They've just started one called Microdose newsletter. And Michael Pollan, for those of you that are Michael Pollan fans, he is curating a nice little newsletter every couple days out of there. So that might be a nice start.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is lots of options and no one path or way. Thanks, Pam. So next, a bit of a segue, a nice segue. Having completed the MAPS MDMA training, where would you recommend for training as a prescriber and ketamine assisted therapy?
Well, the ketamine assisted therapy, there's a lot of great offerings, like I said, all the ones on that one thing, and they'll all be listed on the PDF. All of them are great. And then you have to figure out how much deeper you want to go. So, I mean, the program that I'm involved with, the Roots to Thrive Ketamine Assisted Therapy program, is a 12-week resiliency program with 3 ketamine assisted program sessions in it. But it's group therapy, which I find phenomenally fantastic. And actually, I think people get better a lot faster in the groups. I used to do one-on-one, and I have done dyad work as well. So 2 therapists with 1 patient. That's the model that MAPS teaches. And that's a great model too. But man, when you watch groups, really do the work together, you see the accelerated work there. So that kind of training may be helpful if you already do group work, is adding your ketamine on top of that. But I would start with one of those programs, right? Prady, Fluence, Polaris, Healing Realms, Dr. Phil Wilson's Ketamine Associates, anything in Canada. If there's other, we'll get those. If there's any other programs in Canada that are doing training right now, we'll get them on the list as well. But that's where you got to start. And then you definitely want to be in a peer supervision group. You want to get involved with other physicians that are doing it as well. In Canada, there's two or three really great listservs where physicians are all leaning in and asking questions. My patient with Parkinson's disease, are they a good candidate for ketamine assisted therapy? And then you get people from across Canada and North America helping you, other psychiatrists, other neurologists, all sorts of therapists with decades of experience. So like I said, if you're looking at ketamine assisted therapy, just start with one that works for your timeline and your budget, and then go from there.
Oh, sorry, it was me who asked the question. So how do you hook up with the listservs that of other physicians, other psychiatrists that are doing this work?
It's pretty, what you can just, I can get my email out there. You can email me and I can get you added.
Thanks, Pam.
But yeah, anybody who's a psychiatrist or anyone who's working with ketamine can join into the programs. I think usually their qualification isn't, you have to be an MD or a nurse practitioner or somebody who can actually prescribe ketamine and is possibly working with ketamine or hoping to work with ketamine.
Thank you.
Lovely. Next, we have, how are integration sessions different from deep psychotherapy?
Well, the integration, you're actually working with the remnants of what has come out of the psychedelic therapy. And so people are often, they have come to their own insights. They have come to new, deeper knowings. They have let go of things. And so they're not really so much slogging through it anymore, but now it's like, who am I now? They're not, it's more like that's the seed there. I have come through this experience. Who am I now and who am I becoming? And how do I move forward based on what I have learned? So, I mean, I think it's just accelerated is what it is. Deep psychotherapy can also get people to that. But what you can do with the psychedelic assisted therapy or ketamine assisted therapy is you just get them there faster. And often they slough off stuff a lot faster. Stuff they don't need, triggers disappear. They don't have to work through the triggers. They don't have to do exposure therapy to get over something. It's just gone. Like we will often have something like if you work with veterans with ketamine or any psychedelic therapy, MDMA, I hear this all the time from my MDMA colleagues. You work with a veteran and literally the next day after they're looking at you going, today is the first day I've woken up without nightmares. It's like that. it's that fast in some cases, not for everyone, but it's enough that you take notice of that. And so I don't know if that really answers your question, because I don't do deep psychotherapy, but I have done a lot of integration sessions. And I think that the person, our patient in front of us, their inner healer, their inner knower, their expert, their inner expert is a lot more in tune and a lot more on top of what they have learned and now what they need to do and what the next level is for them.
Thank you. Yeah, this question was from Dale, and Dale, I'll actually give you an opportunity, and I see there you have a few other questions that we'll address, but yeah, he did also mention adding to the list of therapies that would be a good fit. AEDP, Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy. I'm actually curious, and perhaps some others are as well, just to hear a little bit more about what that is.
Sure. I'm a faculty member with the Aedp Institute, and so it's been around for a little over 20 years, and it really combines the best of neuroscience, very relational work, very focused on the alliance, and incorporating attachment understanding. And I think what Diana Fosha, the founder, has added to it is what she calls metatherapeutic processing. So often one may process a traumatic memory in a therapy situation and then reflect, what is it like to have experienced this today? And deepening that question, which actually helps to integrate kind of the new neurons in the hippocampus around, there's a new experience of who I am that feels good, that feels different. And so it's an encouragement to stay with the newness of that experience in a very somatic way, possibly through imagery, and in that way staying longer with the positive change that has just happened, rather than just the completion or the resolution of that maybe childhood trauma that one may have worked on. So it's, having practiced as a psychotherapist for a little over 40 years, it's the best model that I've come across that integrates body orientation, attachment orientation, and therapeutic alliance that recognizes current neuroscience. So there's a little, that's my experience and excitement about it.
Well, and it hits on all the things that really do accelerate during psychedelic therapy. Attachment disorders are massive in our society, right? And yet you can, in a psychedelic therapy session, you could simply lay a weighted blanket on somebody and tuck them in, and they may go through a rebirthing something, you know, and they do it all by themselves. And all you've done is really facilitate the space and made it safe for them to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I think any therapy you're good at is going to be a good adjunct to work with. Like that, that's really it. If you're good at it, great. And I don't think there's any, you ask like, what are the best to work with psychedelic therapies? I think it comes down to what Dr. Raquel Bennett says, the best therapy is the one you're good at. You will be good at it.
Then you'll be stronger with the therapeutic alliance, which all the research has been saying that is the outstanding one. It was an undergrad in 1970. Yeah. Is there any, the other part of my question, Pam, was, is there research on the different models that are used in integration or psychedelic assisted therapy in terms of what's going to work best with which medicines, what's going to work best with different diagnostic categories, with different traumas?
These are great questions, and this tells us we have decades of clinical trials ahead of us in this.
Right. Okay. So I guess the answer is no, not yet.
No, not yet. And you know what, there's very little quality in the ones, like for instance, there's a recently published a study by Compass Pathways, and their outcomes were abysmal. But I mean, the behind the scenes conversations on that were because probably the quality of the therapists. Yes. It's more logical that that's the outcomes, because when you compare to the MDMA MAPS trials for PTSD that are hitting, 67% and upward success rate after 3 therapies, it's not, the Compass Pathways outcomes are not congruent with the rest of high quality psychedelic therapy.
Right.
So I think that seems to go back to the fact of you want to be really good at what you're doing, and then psychedelic therapy is a tool. And
Yeah.
and I think in your question too, you're asking which therapies to do with while psychedelic therapy is going on. The model I work with, our team doesn't do psychotherapy during the psychedelic experience.
Well,
You're
but with
basically-
MDMA, isn't it more possible to actually work with the material that's coming up? I have not yet trained and used that medicine, but that's my understanding. Whereas with psilocybin,
They don't do,
it's more,
even in the MAPS model, they don't do a lot. It's a lot of holding space. It's a lot of holding space, and then the therapy comes after within the 36-hour neuroplasticity. And that's not even fully proven. That's again, a theory that is the optimal time to really do the integrated work.
okay, thank you.
Great questions, and we don't know, and if you're up for any clinical trials, I'm sure they'll be all
Okay.
in on that.
Great.
I am curious as well, just to expand a bit. I know it was touched on, but is there much difference depending on which medicine on different models or types of therapy that are used?
Yeah, that absolutely is a great question and needs to be elucidated as well. I mean, we don't even know which medicine yet is best for what. Like, we know that a lot of them are really great for alcoholism or smoking cessation or partner violence, PTSD, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, addiction, but which one is best for even those? We're just babies in this research. 40 years we've been in the war on drugs. We could have done a lot of research in 40 years. So we've got to start here. So there's 77 clinical trials registered right now for psilocybin at clinicaltrials.gov. So it's happening. Not that many on LSD, but that's growing. There's, I think, 5 on ibogaine that are registered and growing. 5-MeO DMT. It's growing. So it's gonna be bit by bit. We'll figure it out.
Indeed. Thank you. From Mark, we had, in case of a known ketamine allergy, what would be a replacement medicine?
A real known ketamine allergy. That is a real rarity for the ER docs out there. Anybody doing ER? Ian, you're an ER doc. Have you ever seen a ketamine allergy? Maybe he's not.
I haven't seen one, honestly. I suppose possibly methoxetamine might be trialed as a similar agent, but there's so little experience with that.
Yeah. Well, and I guess really, I mean, I was just curious about the ketamine allergy because we always have it there as a contraindication to therapy, but I've yet to ever see it. But your question is really what else could you use? And it really depends what you're treating the patient for. If they're PTSD, I mean, again, and you have to keep it in the context of what is actually legal. Ketamine's legal. It's a psychedelic-like medicine that is legal, and we can use it, and we use it a lot more because of the fact that it is legal. MDMA hopefully will be legal in 2023. That's what the whispers at the federal level sound like. And if the memorandum of understanding that was presented to Health Canada on psilocybin is accepted, then we could see in the new year early psilocybin available for people with that qualify for MAID. So if you qualify for MAID, then you would automatically qualify for psilocybin. And hopefully that'll go through. But really, the only psychedelic-like medicine that's legal right now is ketamine. So I guess it still goes back to the question: what are you hoping to treat for that patient?
Thank you. From Dr. Teresa Wood, we had, do we know anything about ketamine, etc., in concussion patients? Is it safe? Does it work for their trauma issues, many of which are compounded by the concussion?
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Teresa, one of my buddies from med school and residency. Nice, timely answering our questioning on this. Have been talking to one of the foremost concussion experts, Dr. Dan Engel in the US, and this is really his specialty area. around concussion. And he feels that he actually has a whole concussion protocol using ketamine later on for the neuroplasticity. But his feeling is, and it hasn't been studied, we don't have the clinical trials for this, his feeling is that using ketamine acutely in TBI or concussion would be of benefit. He doesn't see that there'd be any contraindications, especially, and I know there's, again, in the ER stuff, there's this back and forth, does ketamine raise ICP or not, or has that finally been put to rest that it's not a concern? It's probably more likely it's not a concern. But when you think medical, legal, you know, you're always going to have somebody get up on the stand and bring up those other 6 studies, even though they're not as good as the 12 studies on the other side. But that being said, it looks like it's probably good for acute TBI, or, you know, within under 6 weeks, and certainly definitely could be part of the therapy for trauma in post-concussive syndromes, and any PTSD related to that as well. So his in fact, he is, I think, reconfiguring his whole clinic just for post-concussive treatment and TBI with ketamine assisted therapy.
I would love to.
Because they're both there, right? The TBI and the PTSD intertwined.
Totally. I'd be interested in connecting with him. I had so many clients in Whistler with concussions, and many of them, because they're kids who party beforehand and then they have their injury and then they're not functioning in society. They find that they can't use any of their previous things that they used to use without feeling very paranoid or very off kilter. So obviously it would have to be done in a more contained environment than the ones in which they're trying to play. But because they're so scared of anything that's affecting any psychedelics now, because their threshold for things seems to be completely different than pre-injury. So I'd just be interested in seeing if he's actually tried any of that, and if it seems safe, and if they're not, like, or if they're having to use even like micro dosing, or how they're functioning in that environment. I'd be fascinated to hear about it.
Yeah, well, email me offline and I'll get you in touch with him. And he also has a book, the concussion management book, that he puts all of his decades of experience in that book. So that's a good start for people, but that's outside the psychedelic realm. There's no psychedelics in his book, I believe. But there's also likely to be a clinical trial in the near future with elite athletes. So NHL hockey players using an initial macro dose. So those with TBI, concussion, and possibly PTSD, certainly depression and anger issues, probably related to the repetitive TBIs in elite athletes. So probably it'll be a macro dose of psilocybin that will then have a three arms. So one will be a macrodose of psilocybin, and then just integrative therapy. There'll be a macrodose with psilocybin followed by microdosing psilocybin for the long-term neuroplasticity effects, and then another arm of just microdosing psilocybin. And the other part of that study, which I'm hoping they'll put into it, or what will get put into it, is actually using some of the challenge tests. So Dr. Adam Gazali out of UCSF, who is a neuroscientist, and he has the wonderful distinction of being the only person to ever get the FDA to approve a video game as a medical device for treatment of ADHD. But he thinks that if on top of doing a macro and microdose, that if you do challenge tests with people, like push their ability. So if you're a hockey player, you get them their stick handling, so that you challenge them so that they're creating the collaterals and the neuroplasticity, we could probably get even better results from that. So again, early days. I don't know if that will happen, that study, but it should happen.
Well, we've got a lot of clients out here. If you need a study on mountain biking and snowboarding clients, we've got a whole mountain full of them.
Yeah, totally agree.
Thanks, Pam.
Yeah, thank you. Really fascinating. And I see Jennifer put in a podcast on traumatic brain injury and psychedelics there as well, from plantmedicine.org.
Yeah, thanks. I've got it pulled up here. Dr. Kate Pate is a neurophysiologist who has been conducting research for 15 years on neurotrauma. So that will be very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, she looks like the director of research for Heroic Hearts. That's a veterans organization, and they have a ton of TBI in the veteran population, especially the micro concussions from the shooting ranges.
And we have another question from Dale here. What studies are there that show microdosing psilocybin is effective beyond placebo?
Well, there's actually, the thing is, there's a number out. You know, there was the one that Dr. Robin Carhart Harris and his team just recently published against escitalopram, which is actually showed quite a beneficial experience there, but it wasn't a full microdosing dose. It was only 1 or 2 doses. And then Vince Polito, who is a researcher out of Australia, is actually going back through some of the recent ones that say it's placebo and is recrunching their data. And he's having a hard time getting their data, as per an email that I got this morning, saying they're not giving their data over. That's always worrisome when researchers won't give their data. But the interesting thing about this microdosing, whether it's psilocybin, LSD, 5-MeO, DMT, iboga and stuff, it's kind of got this phenomena out there. So for something that people seem to want to say is placebo, there's a sure hell of a large amount of people doing it across the world. So with our microdosing.me study, that was one of the things we were really looking at. And so there's actually a very good AI program called Placebo that is in version 2 of that study and pulls out what is called the response bias. Because when you're doing a prospective observational trial, you don't have placebo in it. That's only for controlled clinical trials, but you do have a response bias. But everybody has a response bias. You eat food, you expect to feel full. That's a response bias. So it's really hard to pull bias out of anything we do, whether it's a trial or not. So it's an interesting question, and we'll see. There's I think there's 3 registered clinical trials right now for microdosing. I expect there'll be a lot more.
Thank you so much. Along the microdosing piece, and apologies if you said this at the beginning of the chat before I was on, I'm curious, you know, it seems like there's sort of two different things here, right? There's the macrodosing psychedelic sessions with preparation and then integration. And then there's, you know, the microdosing. And it seems to me that it would almost be, there'd be parallels in training, but also some big differences. And curious if you think folks should be kind of focusing on one or the other, or doing a bit of both, and what differences you foresee between those kind of different types of therapeutic approach.
Well, I've been collecting case reports on microdosing for about 6 years. Dr. Jim Fadiman has also joined our microdosing research team now, and he's got thousands of microdosing studies. And I anticipate the targets we're going to see, because this is what the case reports are showing. And they're anecdotal, and they're not the highest quality of evidence, of course, but when you start getting in the thousands of them, you got to start looking at the trend lines. We're seeing trend lines for Parkinson, reducing the tremor in Parkinson's, reducing the depression in Parkinson's. I've been following a group of women who have cerebellar ataxia. They've been sending me videos of their progression over for the last many years, and you watch them before they start microdosing. They send a video of themselves trying to put on a pair of pants, and they can't, they're falling over. And you know 6 months later, I'm getting a video from the same person who is standing there putting on a pair of pants. So you got to go, is there a real signal there or not? It needs to be studied. There needs to be a robust clinical trial, but the reality is, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to actually do that? Who's going to do a $5 million study to see if microdosing psilocybin helps cerebellar ataxia? You know, you're going to need philanthropy to do that. We're definitely seeing, you know, when I was in my chronic pain clinic, I was starting to see this trend of people in their 70s and 80s coming in and saying they're microdosing and that they're having a great time. Me and Ethel have started microdosing. We're much happier. We're not high at all. Don't get me wrong, Dr. Kryskow. We're just happier. quite a few case reports around suicidality, that people said microdosing changed that. Like, I was suicidal. Somebody told me to start microdosing. I tried it. I'm not. Of course, the trend in Silicon Valley is microdosing LSD for attention, for ADHD, for connection. I know people that microdose weddings. That's what they do. They're much better weddings. No one gets in fights. Nobody punches anyone out. They're all happy. Yeah, I think that we're seeing a lot of, I think there's probably very likely neurogenesis based on the case reports, definitely mood improvement based on the case reports, and reaction time. That'll be in one of the upcoming manuscripts from the microdose data, is that people over 50, their reaction time got faster. And if you were under 50, it didn't. It stayed about the same. So it's really, when it goes back to that placebo question, not placebo, which is the app question, like how much response bias can you have for reaction time? Like, can you placebo a faster reaction time? I don't know. I don't know if that's a possibility. So anyways, I think, we might see microdosing in all the different forms. Iboga might be something that people are microdosing. I know Beckley Foundation in the UK is very interested in studying Iboga microdosing just to bring down addiction behaviors, binding affinity in the brain for addictive behaviors. And so we might see that show up as a vitamin, more like a vitamin therapy that you take as you get older, or if you have any of these conditions. Whereas I think the macrodosing, obviously PTSD, depression, trauma, and maybe even just, excuse me, how about happiness? Like, how about just creativity? Is that a possibility that will say that you have the right to your own consciousness and your own mind? And maybe there's all sorts of, there's one very famous band, they all take mushrooms before they go up on stage. They say it keeps them all connected. They play 3-hour sets without a break. And it's a mushroom. So anyways, I'm rambling a bit, but I don't know. I think all possibilities, and it's a very exciting time. And if you're at the beginning of your medical career, I think you've got a long, interesting career ahead of you. You'll get to say, I was there when it all started again.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really inspiring and interesting thought. And there's, kind of along the same lines, but do you know, is anyone using psychedelics in treatment of dementia? And is there research on that?
There is a clinical trial that may be held on Vancouver Island. That will be for that microdosing for Alzheimer's dementia. That is likely. And there is, I think, 2 groups in the US that may be multi-centers for that trial. So no, it's not happening yet. It's not registered yet, but it is in progress. At least one, if not more.
Wonderful. Any other questions out there? And you can feel free to just pop on off mute. I don't have to read your question off if you want to ask Dr. Pam anything else in our precious time together.
I have a question. I'm wondering if a physician comes to you and asks how important it is that they participate in these therapies, what your response is prior to them facilitating them.
You mean that the debate, should somebody using these therapies have experience with these therapies? Mm-hmm. I don't know that I'm the definitive voice on that. I have an opinion on that, and my opinion is I think yes, I absolutely do think this, and I think many people have used this analogy before, and I think it's astute. Is that are you going to have go to a therapist for a sex therapy if they've never had sex? Probably not the best person to be getting your therapy from. And I think there's something that if you've had a psychedelic experience, you understand some of the wording people will use. And I wonder what is the potential harm of somebody coming out of an experience where maybe for the first time they felt unconditional love, and maybe this sense of something bigger than them, and they're trying to explain it, and the person across from them doesn't have a friggin' clue what they're talking about, and what could be the harm of the look on that therapist's face going, what the hell are you talking about? Because we're not perfect at hiding. We don't hide our emotions well when we're in therapy. I can guarantee that. So my opinion is, personally, I think you should have experience with at least one psychedelic medicine so that you can have some lean in compassion for what somebody may be expressing to you when you work with them in the integration side. I just think you can't. How can you explain water if you've never been in water? How can you explain sex if you've never, that's just my opinion. Others would argue with me that that it introduces bias, but we're biased up the yin yang, excuse my soapbox again, right? Like if I say to a patient, this therapy is really going to work for you, this pill is going to help you, I'm introducing an expectancy bias, and we use that to our benefit and to our patients' benefit all the time. We cheerlead our patients all the time. So I'm okay with being biased in this case if it makes my patients better and they don't need me because they're better. That's my soapbox.
Great soapbox. Thank you. I like it. And just revisiting that question about dementia, there was an email that came out recently on one of the listservs about ibogaine for Parkinson's dementia. So I'll just pop those in here in the chat as well. So yeah, just a slew of research and really interesting, exciting studies that are happening, and training programs. So thank you so much, Pam, for sharing your knowledge and giving such a lovely review of, a very broad topic that's evolving, it seems, daily here. So really appreciate that, and we'll look forward to your resource that you were mentioning. And just a friendly reminder as well to please complete the evaluation so we can hear from you, get feedback. And as well, Antoinette just popped it in the chat, just making sure that your full name is visible on the screen, or that you complete the attendance survey so that you can get your CME credits and certificate of attendance. And this is our last session of the series, although we will be hopefully putting together another series and launching that again in the spring. We'll take a bit of time off to regroup and review the evaluation and feedback that we've received, and find some more speakers, likely have some repeat offenders. Pam, you'll probably be hearing from us. And as well, if anyone else is interested in presenting or sharing or facilitating a session, please do reach out and let us know. We're definitely open to that. So I think, we'd like to keep this going, keep the momentum going, stay connected. And continue to help this movement go forward in a good way. So thank you again, and take good care, everyone, until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kudos to you guys for getting this going again. Well done.